Most people believe freedom means doing whatever you want. They equate liberty with limitless choice, with the absence of restraint, with the fantasy of being accountable to no one. But Aristotle would have called this a child's dream, not true freedom. For him, the deepest chains were not imposed by kings, governments, or tyrants, but by the weaknesses within a man's own soul. And here lies the forgotten rule: habit shapes character, and character determines destiny. To Aristotle, freedom was not the absence of chains, but the ability to govern oneself when temptation and chaos strike. It was not the liberty to indulge, but the strength to choose rightly, repeatedly, until virtue became second nature. This idea is nearly lost in our age of instant gratification. Today, people are addicted to convenience, to the dopamine spike of social media, to the endless buffet of distractions that train them not toward strength, but toward dependence. We have confused comfort with freedom, just as Nietzsche warned that modern man mistakes his own cage for safety. Think of the lion raised in captivity, fed daily, safe from predators, never forced to hunt. Its belly is full, but its spirit is broken. Now, compare it with the lion in the wild, hungry, scarred, chased by danger, yet alive with a ferocity that burns in its eyes. Which is free? The captive with full stomach, or the wild with sharpened claws? Aristotle would have answered without hesitation, the wild, because freedom is not ease, it is capacity. The ability to act in alignment with virtue, even when storms rage, even when appetites scream. But here is the modern tragedy. We are living in what Carl Jung called an age of lost symbols. People no longer inherit coherent traditions of discipline. Instead, they are trained by algorithms that reward weakness. They scroll endlessly, consuming images curated to manipulate desire. Freud would have said, the unconscious has been hijacked. Jung would have said, the shadow is running free. And Sartre would remind us, we are complicit in this self-deception, living in bad faith, pretending our shackles are freedom. The result? Fragile men and women, easily swayed by flattery, propaganda, and manipulation. People whose habits were never trained toward virtue, and thus whose characters crumble under pressure. A generation brilliant at consuming, but unskilled at enduring. This is why Aristotle's forgotten rule matters more today than ever before, because character is not something you can fake. It is forged, and if you do not forge it, someone else will shape it for you. Let me ask you, have you ever noticed how the people who seem strongest in times of crisis are rarely the ones with the highest IQ or the most wealth? Instead, they are the ones whose daily habits, often invisible, train them to stand firm when others collapse. The soldier who doesn't panic when bullets fly, the mother who remains calm when her child is sick, the thinker who refuses to bow to collective madness. Aristotle would have said, this is no accident. This is the fruit of virtue in action. Virtue to him was not abstract moralizing. It was the practiced excellence of the soul. It was doing the right thing, in the right way, at the right time, until your very being became aligned with strength. But there is also a darker truth. Just as habits can forge unshakable character, they can also forge weakness, and weakness is the lever used by manipulators. Dark psychology thrives on the fragile. The politician who knows how to appeal to fear, the narcissist who mirrors your unhealed wounds, the system that trains you to click, to buy, to obey. Weak habits create a fractured soul, and fractured souls can be ruled. This is why Marcus Aurelius warned, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He was not being poetic. He was giving survival instructions. He knew that if you fail to master yourself, the world will master you. So this is where we begin. not with modern gimmicks, not with self-help platitudes, but with the wisdom of Aristotle, the forgotten rule that habit is destiny, and that freedom is not indulgence but mastery. In this series we will uncover how Aristotle's virtue ethics can be applied to your life today, how manipulators and systems exploit your untrained habits, how to build daily disciplines that make you unshakable in a fragile world. This is not theory. This is a manual for those who want to be free in the truest sense. Not dependent, not enslaved, not fragile, but alive with a character that cannot be broken. Because in the end, as Heraclitus once said, character is fate, and if you do not shape yours, the world will. Aristotle once declared, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." These words are often quoted, rarely lived, because to live them means to face a difficult truth. Your freedom is not determined in the moment of crisis. It is determined long before, by the thousands of small choices that became your habits, and the habits that became your character. To Aristotle, virtue was not innate. You were not born courageous, temperate, or just. You were born with potential. That potential had to be trained, like a musician practicing scales or an athlete rehearsing movement until the body itself remembered. Virtue was the music of the soul, and habit was the rehearsal that made the song second nature. Imagine two soldiers. The first has studied courage in theory. He has read about battlefield strategy. He has attended lectures on bravery. The second has spent years training, marching in heat, enduring hardship, rehearsing the response to fear until his body acts before his mind hesitates. Which soldier will stand firm when arrows fall? Aristotle's answer is clear: the trained one. Potential without practice is like an unsharpened blade. Shiny, perhaps, but useless in combat. The rule is simple. Virtue becomes power only through habit. Without habit, virtue is theory, and in the battlefield of life, theory collapses. But Aristotle's idea of virtue was not perfectionism. He rejected extremes. Virtue, he argued, was the mean between vices, a delicate balance forged by reason and practice. Courage was not rashness, but neither was it cowardice. Generosity was not wastefulness, but neither was it greed. This golden mean is what allowed virtue to be lived in the real world. Anyone can be reckless, anyone can be paralyzed by fear, but to act with courage, at the right time, in the right measure, for the right reasons, that is the fruit of discipline, and that discipline is planted, watered, and harvested through daily choices. Modern psychology confirms this. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, one of the most effective therapeutic methods today, teaches that repeated patterns of thought and action shape emotional reality. To change your life, you do not wait for inspiration, you retrain the cycle. Thought becomes behavior. Behavior becomes habit. Habit reshapes thought. Aristotle, 2,000 years before, had already laid down this principle. This is where Aristotle challenges modern illusions. We often think freedom means spontaneity, the ability to follow impulse without restraint. But Aristotle saw this as the most dangerous slavery. The man who cannot resist his appetites is not free. He is enslaved to them. Consider addiction. A person addicted to alcohol or drugs may insist he is choosing to indulge, but what kind of choice is one he cannot stop making? The chain is invisible, but it is real. Aristotle would say, this is not liberty, but bondage. True freedom, then, is the power to govern yourself, and that power is built by habit. Every time you choose discipline over indulgence, truth over comfort, integrity over convenience, You are forging chains of virtue strong enough to anchor you when storms arrive. Marcus Aurelius echoed this centuries later in his Meditations. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. The Stoic emperor was reminding himself, and us, that freedom is internal, but to reach it, one must train the mind as rigorously as a soldier trains his body. Aristotle's insight aligns with what neuroscientists call neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself through repetition. Habits carve grooves into the mind, just as rivers carve valleys into stone. The more often you walk a path, the easier it becomes to travel. This is why trauma can be so difficult to overcome. Trauma is repetition burned into the nervous system, but it is also why healing is possible by deliberate repetition of new behaviors, whether through therapy, meditation, or disciplined practice. You can carve new grooves, rewrite the code. Carl Jung described this as shadow integration. The parts of ourselves that sabotage us are not erased by willpower alone. They must be faced, acknowledged, and retrained into new alignment. Aristotle would have called this the training of the passions. Modern psychology calls it healing. The principle is the same. What you practice, you become. Let me give you a story. In 399 BC, Socrates stood trial in Athens. He was accused of corrupting the youth, of challenging the gods, of unsettling the city's traditions. He was offered the chance to escape, to live quietly in exile, to abandon his dangerous habit of questioning power. But Socrates refused. He drank the hemlock and died with serenity. Why? Because by the time of his trial, his habits had already sealed his character. He had lived a life of examination, of courage, of fidelity to truth. To betray that now would not have been survival. It would have been death of the soul. This is Aristotle's principle embodied. When habits are trained toward virtue, freedom is not negotiable. Even under threat of death, the soul remains unshakable. Contrast this with those who betray themselves under pressure, the man who cheats for comfort, the leader who lies to preserve status, the citizen who obeys injustice to avoid discomfort. Their habits betray them, because their habits had already trained them to value ease over truth. We live in an age of psychological warfare. Social media engineers habits designed to capture attention. Advertisers prey on dopamine cycles. Politicians and corporations thrive on your inability to delay gratification. In such a world, Aristotle's forgotten rule is not philosophy, it is survival. Because if you do not train your habits, someone else will. If you do not shape your character, the system will shape it for you. Freedom is not won once, it is forged daily in the furnace of repetition. So, what does this mean for us? It means if you want unshakable character, do not wait for inspiration. Do not hope for motivation. Build the habit. Train the soul. Rehearse virtue until it becomes second nature. Because in the end, when the storm comes, and it always comes, you will not rise to the level of your hope, you will fall to the level of your training. That is Aristotle's forgotten rule. Aristotle taught that freedom rests on disciplined habit. But what happens when habits are left untrained, when appetites run wild, when character is fragile, when the soul is soft? This is the terrain where manipulators thrive. The world is not neutral, it is full of forces, political, commercial, interpersonal, that exploit weakness, and the battlefield is not external, it is psychological. The tyrant who rules a nation begins first by ruling the imagination of the people. The narcissist who dominates a relationship does so by penetrating the cracks in another's character. Weakness is not only a personal burden, it is an invitation. To understand how manipulators break character, we must see how they exploit the very principles Aristotle outlined. If habits form the foundation of freedom, then fragile or corrupt habits form the foundation of bondage. Take Freud's analysis. Human beings are driven by unconscious desires, often repressed, denied, or hidden. A manipulator studies these repressions, not with compassion, but with calculation. They offer flattery where insecurity hides. They offer fear where courage is untrained. They exploit the very appetites that enslave. Carl Jung went further. He spoke of the shadow, the disowned parts of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. The manipulator thrives here. If you repress anger, they provoke it. If you repress longing, they dangle it. If you repress ambition, they seduce it. The shadow, unexamined, becomes the lever of control. And Nietzsche added another layer. He warned of slave morality, the system by which weakness sanctifies itself, by which people come to praise submission as virtue and call power evil. A manipulator weaponizes this by convincing you that to resist them is selfish, that to question them is immoral, that your chains are actually your crown. History is full of examples. The totalitarian regimes of the 20th century, Nazi Germany, Stalin's Soviet Union, were not built on sheer force alone. They were built on manipulation of habit. Daily propaganda, ritual salutes, chants, songs, all trained the population into reflexive obedience. The untrained character became clay in the hands of tyrants. In personal life, narcissists often mirror their target's desires. At first, they appear perfect, reflecting back your dreams, values, fears. This mirroring disarms you. But once trust is secured, control begins. And why does it succeed? Because the target has not yet examined their own shadow. They are enslaved by the parts of themselves they refuse to face. Sartre called this bad faith. The refusal to confront our own freedom. Instead, people hide behind roles, masks, or systems. The manipulator senses this hiding and exploits it. Today's battlefield is more subtle, but no less dangerous. Algorithms are designed to feed your untrained appetites. Scroll long enough, and you'll see how quickly weakness is monetized. Insecurity? Here's an ad for beauty products. Loneliness? Here's an app to simulate intimacy. Anger? Here's political content that inflames it further. This is not coincidence, it is design, and it works because habits are fragile, because self-mastery has been neglected. Aristotle's forgotten rule has been replaced with Pavlov's law. Ring the bell, get the click. Dark persuasion tactics rely on exploiting three cracks in character. Fear. The untrained soul crumbles under the suggestion of loss. Desire. The undisciplined mind is enslaved by appetite. Confusion. The unfocused mind is easily led by those who appear certain. These cracks are widened daily by culture itself. Without deliberate training, a person becomes a bundle of impulses waiting to be manipulated. But notice, manipulators always fail against the unshakable, against those who have trained their habits into virtue, against those who can look temptation in the eye and decline, who can face fear and act anyway, who can endure isolation rather than betray their principles. Consider Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps. His captors controlled his body, his labor, his food, but they could not control his inner freedom. He wrote later, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." This was Aristotle's principle, reborn in the darkest century. Habits of discipline, of meaning, of resilience became an armor no manipulator could penetrate. To resist manipulation, one must not only see the battlefield, but fortify the soul. Aristotle's prescription was not passive, it was active cultivation. Habits of reflection, of moderation, of courage. Against fear, cultivate courage daily, not in grand gestures but in small acts, speaking truth, enduring discomfort, facing shadows. Against desire, cultivate temperance, not repression but mastery. To enjoy pleasure without being owned by it. Against confusion, cultivate wisdom, not by absorbing noise but by deliberate study, contemplation and silence. This triad, courage, temperance, wisdom, is not only ancient virtue, it is modern defense. Because in a world where everything is designed to provoke fear, desire and confusion, the disciplined soul becomes unshakable. There is a cruel irony here. Weakness does not only leave you vulnerable, it attracts exploitation. Just as predators seek the wounded animal, manipulators sense fragility. The narcissist targets the insecure, not the self-possessed. The propagandist preys on the uninformed, not the disciplined thinker. This is why Aristotle insisted, virtue is the condition of freedom. Without it, you are not merely weak, you are already ruled. So we see. The psychological battlefield is not fought in abstract debates, but in the daily training of character. Every neglected habit becomes a weak wall in the fortress of the soul, and every manipulator knows how to press against weak walls. But the good news is this: every wall can be rebuilt, every habit can be retrained, every shadow can be faced. And once this work is done, once the soul is trained, no manipulator, not tyrant, not narcissist, not algorithm, can bend you. It is one thing to admire Aristotle's principle of virtue and habit. It is another to live it. Most people nod when they hear "we are what we repeatedly do," but then they return to scrolling, to distraction, to the comfort of convenience. Why? Because building character feels too abstract, too heavy, too demanding for the chaos of modern life. But Aristotle was practical. His philosophy was not a museum piece, but a manual. Virtue was not built through rare acts of greatness. It was formed in the rhythm of the ordinary. The question is not, will I be courageous in war? The question is, will I train courage in the small battles of today, so that when war comes, my soul will already know the path? Think of character as a blacksmith's blade. No sword is made by accident. It is hammered, folded, heated, cooled over and over until the metal takes form. So too the human soul. Habits are the hammer strikes. Each repetition shapes you, whether you notice or not. Wake with discipline rather than drifting in distraction. Speak truth in small matters so that you will not stumble in great ones. Endure discomfort voluntarily, whether through fasting, exercise or silence, so that when discomfort comes uninvited, you are already acquainted with it. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, practiced this. Each morning he reminded himself in his meditations, "Today I shall meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil." This was not pessimism, it was training. He rehearsed adversity before it arrived, so that when it came, his soul was steady. If Aristotle were alive now, what would he say to a generation trained by algorithms and advertisements? Likely something simple: reclaim your habits or lose your freedom. Train attention. Modern life is designed to fract your focus. Reclaim it through meditation, journaling or daily silence. Train the ability to sit with your own mind without fleeing into noise. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Attention is the gateway to that confrontation." Strengthen the body. Aristotle saw virtue as embodied. Exercise, discipline of diet, and physical resilience are not vanity, they are spiritual training. The Stoics often expose themselves to cold, hunger, or labor, not to punish the body, but to sharpen the will. Moderate desire. Freedom is not abstinence from pleasure, but mastery of it. The habit of temperance means enjoying without enslavement. Nietzsche put it sharply, for man to be redeemed from revenge, that is for me the bridge to the highest hope. Revenge here is not only against others, but against one's own weakness. To master appetite is to free the will, confront the shadow. Jung's prescription for wholeness was not denial of darkness, but integration. Write down your envies, your fears, your resentments. Admit them, then train them. A man who denies anger becomes its puppet. A man who integrates anger wields it as strength. Live with intention. Sartre's warning about bad faith was that we hide from freedom by pretending we are mere roles: employee, parent, consumer. To live intentionally means refusing this excuse. It means asking daily, am I acting from habit, aligned with virtue, or am I fleeing into convenience? One of the paradoxes of character is this: strength is built by choosing pain voluntarily, not destructive pain, but constructive struggle, fasting when food is plenty, rising early when sleep tempts, speaking truth when silence would protect. Seneca, the Stoic, recommended occasionally living with less, even if you had abundance. Wear rough clothing, eat meager food, and say, "Is this what I feared?" The point was not poverty, but training. By embracing discomfort, you rob it of power. In a fragile age, this is rebellion. Society teaches us to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. But Aristotle would insist the man who avoids pain at all costs has already surrendered freedom. The man who chooses noble struggle, even small ones, is free. Habit need not be dramatic. Often it is quiet. The monk who rises at dawn to pray, the artist who sketches daily, the thinker who writes each morning. These rituals are anchors in chaos. They cultivate what Aristotle called hexis, a stable disposition of the soul. Contrast this with the person who lives reactively, waking to notifications, eating impulsively, speaking without reflection. Their character is as unstable as their habits. And when crisis comes, instability collapses. Modern psychology has given us a word that Aristotle would have loved: anti-fragile. It describes systems that grow stronger under stress, like muscles under weightlifting. Virtue, too, is anti-fragile. Courage grows by facing fear, patience grows by enduring delay, wisdom grows by questioning assumptions. To become anti-fragile is to train habits that welcome struggle as fuel. In this way, character does not merely survive hardship, it thrives on it. And this is why Aristotle's forgotten rule is not only survival, it is transformation. Look around. Culture is fragile. Politicians crumble under scandal. Leaders betray at the scent of pressure. Ordinary people break at the first whisper of discomfort. In such a time, the man or woman of unshakable character stands out like a mountain in a storm. These are the ones who shape history, not because they are loud, but because they are immovable. Their freedom cannot be bought, their loyalty cannot be bribed, their peace cannot be shattered. This is why Aristotle insisted on habit, why Marcus Aurelius endured loss without bitterness, why Jung called us to face the shadow, why Sartre demanded authenticity. They all knew when the storms of manipulation rage, only the trained soul remains upright. So, if you wish to live free in a fragile age, do not wait for crisis to test you. Begin today. Forge habits as if your life depends on them, because it does. The storm will come, and when it does, you will not wonder what to do. You will simply be, because freedom is not what you think in the moment, It is what you have trained your soul to embody. There is a reason the ancients warned that character is destiny, not wealth, not intelligence, not chance, but character. Because when storms come, and they always come, it is not your possessions, your titles, or your cleverness that determine your fate. It is the habits written into the marrow of your soul. Aristotle's forgotten rule is not a gentle suggestion, it is a law as binding as gravity. You will not rise to the level of your hopes, you will fall to the level of your training. Imagine life as a furnace. Some enter with gold, some with straw. When the flames rise, only gold survives. What is gold? It is virtue trained into habit. What is straw? It is convenience, indulgence, impulse. The fire does not ask what you claim to value, it reveals what you have practiced, and this is the haunting truth. The fire is always coming. Crisis, betrayal, loss, temptation, these are not accidents, but inevitabilities. Marcus Aurelius knew this as emperor. Jung knew this in his confrontation with the unconscious. Nietzsche knew this as he stared into the abyss of nihilism. Sartre knew this as he faced the burden of radical freedom. Aristotle knew this as he observed men rise and fall by their own character. The question is never, will hardship come? The question is, what will it find in me when it arrives? So many live as if they are spectators in their own lives. They wait for meaning to arrive, for freedom to be granted, for strength to appear in the hour of need. But Aristotle would call this delusion. Meaning is not found, it is made. Freedom is not given, it is forged. Strength is not discovered, it is trained. Carl Jung warned, the world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you, and what the world tells you will not be truth. It will be manipulation, projection, convenience. To avoid this, you must return to yourself. You must shape a self strong enough to withstand the storm of external voices. This is why habit is not simply routine, it is rebellion. To wake early and train discipline is rebellion against sloth. To moderate desire is rebellion against consumer culture. To confront the shadow is rebellion against denial. To practice courage is rebellion against fear. Each act of virtue is a return, a declaration. I am not clay in the hands of manipulators. I am not an echo of the crowd. I am myself, shaped by deliberate choice, strengthened by habit, alive with freedom. But let us not pretend this is easy. Freedom is heavy. To govern yourself is harder than to be governed by others. To train virtue is harder than to indulge appetite. To face the shadow is harder than to deny it. This is why most flee into distraction, why Sartre said, man is condemned to be free. But this condemnation is also a gift. For in accepting the burden of freedom, in choosing habit aligned with virtue, you rise above the fragile crowd, you become unshakable. Nietzsche spoke of the Übermensch not as a tyrant, but as the one who can create values in a world where old certainties have collapsed. Aristotle would have nodded. The Übermensch is not born, it is trained. It is the soul that has forged character so deeply that it becomes a law unto itself. Picture a mountain. At its base, crowds gather. They build markets, chase pleasures, argue over trivialities. Storms roll in and they scatter in panic. But higher up, a lone figure climbs. Step by step, breath by breath, habit by habit. The path is steep, the air thin, the storms unrelenting. But when the clouds break and lightning strikes, the figure stands unmoved. Not because the mountains spared him hardship, but because the climb itself has made him strong. This is the image of unshakable character, not the absence of storms, but the ability to stand when they arrive, not escape from fear, but courage within it. not indulgence of appetite, but mastery over it. So where does this leave us? With a choice. You can continue drifting, enslaved by impulse, manipulated by shadows, fragile in the face of fire, or you can remember Aristotle's forgotten rule. You can forge habits that shape virtue, virtues that shape character, and character that shapes destiny. The world does not need more spectators. It does not need more consumers, more addicts, more fragile souls. It needs men and women of substance, of depth, of strength. It needs those who cannot be bought, cannot be broken, cannot be swayed. And you can be one of them. Not by accident, not by inspiration, but by habit. Daily, deliberate, relentless habit. The final word, freedom, is not found in escape. It is not found in indulgence. It is not found in the applause of the crowd. Freedom is found in mastery of the self, and mastery is found in habit. So begin today. Take one step, however small. Align it with virtue. Repeat it until it becomes you. Then take another. Because when the fire comes, and it will, you will not have to wonder if you are free. You will already know. As Heraclitus said, and as Aristotle would affirm, character is fate, and fate, my friend, is forged in habit.